Welcome to the Me, You and Data podcast, the podcast that uncovers insights from leading data science and analytics professionals globally to enable you to grow your career, teams and business. I'm Joseph Carla, your host and founder at 633 who bring you this podcast. We hope you get value from this episode. Hello everyone, welcome to season 2 of the Me, You and Data podcast. We're in person as mentioned, and I've got a fantastic guest here, David Whitcombe. I've known David for a long time. David is a founder of his own business, but instead of me introducing him, David, why don't you just tell the listeners a bit about yourself?
Yeah, super. Thanks, Joseph. Really delighted to be here and thanks for having me along on season 2. I run my own business now at the intersection of strategy, consulting and data analytics. But that's actually something that's kind of come through my career in the last 10 years since we first met, I guess, back in 2017. Yeah. So I started my career working in data science for IBM. You told me about a much better and very interesting opportunity kind of moving into kind of commercial, moving into strategy consulting with OC&C Strategy. And that's when we first met. Yeah. Moved over there in 2017, spent kind of 4 years there, realized that a few things. Firstly, that strategy consulting didn't work for smaller businesses and SMEs. They can't afford the price tags. Yeah. Secondly, that strategy consulting wasn't being properly implemented. There wasn't the kind of KPI tracking, the real support to help when the rubber hits the road, go from here's a document of 100 slides to here's what we're actually going to do. Yeah. And so I set up Data Vision Services, DVS, back in 2021, really trying to meet those needs focused on e-commerce, which hopefully we can talk about a bit today, and also private equity portfolio companies as well. And then it's been fantastic working with you, helping to build out the team. You've brought in 2 incredibly talented people to our team as well. So it's been great working together. Fantastic.
No, thanks for that intro. And it's really good to kind of see your growth and progression from, IBM to OC&C to now running a thriving business. And to be honest, it's really easy to speak about your business to people as well. So you mentioned e-commerce, and that's really the meat of this podcast that we're going to be speaking about. So I think really one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, when it comes to e-commerce analytics, David, what are some of the places where you think you should start with clients as it relates to helping them on their e-commerce analytics strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always make a point of starting with the strategy even before we worry into the analytics too much. So we're looking at the kind of really big questions for e-com retailers. Now, first really basic one, what are you trying to achieve? We work with businesses who are very mature, looking to boost their profitability, looking to kind of optimize costs, grow revenue, etc. Equally, we do also work with earlier stage businesses who maybe are still kind of running on venture capital funding or other types of funding, and they're really looking at growth. So we'll always start with a question of what do you want to get from your business and what are you trying to achieve? And then we'll move from there.
Yeah. So the strategy comes first before the analytics. And obviously you've worked with many companies as it relates to their strategy. What are some common blind spots, I guess, that you see from organizations when it comes to kind of diving into, okay, what is their strategy? What do you actually want to get out of a strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for e-com in particular, I think there are 3 lenses that really matter. We worry about channel. Okay. So, are you a fully direct e-commerce business selling at josephcarla.co.uk? Yeah. Are you also selling on Amazon or other kind of third-party marketplaces? Maybe you might have some stores or think about kind of pop-ups and bringing customers in real life into your kind of e-com omni-channel business. We think about product. So what are you selling at the moment? What are the kind of prices that you're selling it at? What are the categories that are doing well for you? How do you think about the reasons why your customer comes to you or the other things that you're kind of adding off of that? And then that keyword customer as well as kind of the third lens. Yeah. Who are the customers that really matter for your business? Are they profitable? Where are you finding them? And where are you finding more of them? Which is obviously always, one of the big challenges.
Yeah, no. And those 3 lenses, it's interesting because I think that we're going to speak about some of those 3 lenses in a lot more detail. And one of the things that I wanted to dive into first is that, there's a lot spoken about metrics. And I think 2 metrics that are I've been working in the marketing analytics space for years, and I've read many CVs, and two keywords that kind of always come up are customer lifetime value and return on ad spend, right? Like, you're the expert. Do you mind just giving the listeners a bit of an overview as to why those two metrics are important as standalone metrics, and then we'll kind of dive into the nuances, I guess.
Yeah, super. So we spend a lot of time working with our clients in marketing and customer, which is obviously the kind of space that we're in. So the two metrics, customer lifetime value and return on advertising spend, they both help predominantly the marketing team to say, how well are we performing? How well is our business doing? And you can kind of think about them at a global level, or you can kind of cross-cut them down to individual channels through time, et cetera, et cetera. But what are they? So customer lifetime value simply represents the amount of value in revenue or profit terms that a business is able to get from each of their customers. So you want to be growing your customer lifetime value through time. Yeah. And critically, you want to get more value from your customer than you pay to acquire them. Yeah. Then the second one is ROAS, or return on advertising spend. So this is more about the kind of short-term immediate impact of your marketing. So if you're working with Google on pay-per-click, or let's say you're working with Meta on getting adverts out on Instagram or getting adverts out on TikTok, for every pound that you spend on that marketing channel, how much are you getting back? So short-term return on that advertising spend. So one is about the kind of long-term, how much is my customer worth? And one is very much about the shorter term, how much am I getting for every penny or pound that I'm spending on marketing? Yeah,
that makes sense. And like, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically with ROAS, the higher your ROAS is, the better. But are there scenarios where a low ROAS for an organization may actually be a better thing? And kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. And it comes back to where we start in the strategy. What is the business really trying to achieve? Yeah. You know, if a business is trying to achieve growth and new customers, they might be willing to accept a lower ROAS because they might be trying to bring in the kind of core that's going to be their customer base going forwards. Yeah. Equally, where a business is more mature, very much looking at kind of spend optimization, looking at making sure they're driving revenue, that's where you want to make sure that you've got overall a very positive ROAS. Even within that, you might have different strategies for each of your channels. Okay. So for example, in e-commerce, you might think about demand generating marketing. So things like getting out to new customers on TikTok, for example, you're probably going to accept a lower ROAS there than you might think about some of your other channels, such as your kind of Google pay-per-click advertising, which is usually about converting demand that already exists in the market. So the ROAS target that you want to go for will vary based on where you are as a business, what you're trying to achieve, but also individually within the different marketing channels that you're using in your ecosystem. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's interesting because the strategic element seems to be a common theme, right? It's like starting with, okay, knowing what it is that you actually want to do determines what you're actually going to do, right? And as it relates to both customer lifetime value and ROAS, these are often viewed separately. Is there a case sometimes for them to be viewed together? Like, what are your kind of mindset and experience as it relates to both of those metrics and how they kind of interact with each other? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've actually just been working on some IP that will hopefully come out in the next few weeks as well around exactly this topic. So amazing. We were working with a fashion business on exactly optimizing their kind of marketing strategy and their marketing budget. A particular contradiction that we came to for them was the difference even between Facebook and Instagram. So every pound they spent on Facebook was generating more pounds of revenue than every pound they spent on Instagram. However, every pound they spent on Instagram was getting them more new customers than every pound they spent on Facebook. So we looked at bringing these two together, both for this client, but also, of course, across the rest of the work that we do. So we've been really iterating on a metric that we're calling kind of CLV Adjusted ROAS, which looks to account for exactly that situation where I want to get immediate revenue and profitability now, but I also want to make sure that I'm giving my channel credit for the revenue that it's going to help me generate over the course of the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and the lifetime of that customer.
Okay, CLV Adjusted ROAS. So do you mind, like, without getting into the kind of nitty gritty and getting a laptop out and starting to model, but do you mind just giving a bit of insight into kind of what that looks like specifically, but also because that use case that you mentioned is a specific use case, how it can be used across other industries and segments as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a consultant, so of course I printed out the formula, but I won't bore everyone with the exacts of kind of how we calculate it. But so, let's take an example.
Yeah.
I'm a small e-commerce business. Last month I spent £1,000 on Facebook. That generated me £2,000 of revenue. So, first tick, right? On a revenue basis, my kind of spend has paid off. But in addition to that £2,000, I've also got in, let's say, 10 new customers to the business. Those customers have spent some money now, but they're also going to spend money with me over the future. Yeah. So for those 10 new customers, each of them might spend another £100 each in the next 12 months. So in this case, the CLV Adjusted ROAS, at least in terms of revenue, would be 3,000 divided by 1,000. So you'd move from saying it's worth £2 to saying it's worth £3.
£3, yeah.
And that really helps to lift the client back up into, I'm not just optimizing for how many pennies and pounds I'm going to make now, but I'm building a kind of stable base for my business going forwards as well. So yeah, we saw it with this particular client as being really important. But fundamentally across all of our e-commerce clients, we're going to help try and shift the mindsets towards exactly this. We're passionate about, it's not just metrics and it's not just numbers, it's what they mean for strategy. So where clients are in growth mode, where clients are thinking about customer acquisition, where clients are thinking about their cohorts, what those cohorts are going to do in the next 12, 18 months, we're going to help them to kind of use versions of this metric. There's various other kind of versions of it around, like you can Google and find lots of articles thinking about kind of combining these two pieces. Yeah. But I think we've managed to get to a level of precision that goes beyond a lot of what's out there in the market at the moment.
That's amazing. And like you've done well to put some IP around that as well. And with regards to rolling that out to the market and other customers, what are some issues or concerns that you may anticipate clients may have, especially if they're not necessarily used to doing it this way? Like, have you come up against anything like that? And I guess what would you say to people who are a bit concerned or who aren't sure kind of like how to go about this? Because a lot of our listeners are in the marketing analytics space as well, so they might have some ideas about how to roll this out. So like any insight for those guys would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, marketing analytics is really interesting, isn't it? Because marketing is so much that combination of art and science. And where I think that the business that I'm building is unique is that we can really help with some of the science around it. But ultimately, you can't just run marketing on numbers. You do have to have that kind of creative space around it. And I think one of the concerns that clients and e-com retailers in general can have is being worried about moving too far towards the data, and, making sure that you're still leaving freedom for experimentation, still leaving freedom for content generation, and, not just kind of plugging it into the system and saying, find me the highest number. So we always try and make sure that while we're empowering our clients with more data, we make sure that that's not the kind of be all and end all of their decision making, making sure that their creative teams are still given kind of space to run within that. With this client in particular, what we ended up saying for each of their marketing channels, no, it's not about trying to make sure that you get to a ROAS of 1 everywhere. We know that there's different roles within the ecosystem, but it's a really great kind of longitudinal check of, are we doing better than we were last month? Are we doing better than we were last year? So, we always have to make sure that we're combining that qualitative insight, giving freedom to the creatives who are far more intelligent than I, actually kind of putting this content out there. And then kind of working from there.
Yeah, no, definitely the science and art and kind of bringing that together is very important. And, as it relates to that science, I guess, and the data piece, really understanding how to assign credit for sales and, attribution really comes into it, right? And there's many different attribution models, like, first interaction, last interaction, what do you pick when? Do you mind just speaking to the different attribution models out there, I guess, and how you assign credit in which situations, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And even the point of getting data is usually kind of step one. Some clients have already got their kind of cloud platforms up and running. They might be working with data that might sit in some of their marketing platforms already. Google Analytics, for example, will give you a really Google-centered view of kind of marketing spend and return on spend. We know that for this, you kind of have to bring in data from multiple data sources, right? You might need to work directly with your Meta channel. You need to work directly with the Google channel. You need to use internal data to track lifetime value. You're looking across devices. You're looking at mobile. You're looking at desktop. And that is exactly where kind of attribution comes in. So we worry about probably three different types of attribution method. The first one that you mentioned, kind of last touch attribution. Yeah. So this is, doesn't matter what I've done for the last 3 weeks. I've seen an advert on, I'm going to pick Facebook because I'm old, and I've clicked through the Facebook advert and I've immediately bought something. So that would say the full credit for that purchase goes to Facebook. Equally, at the other end of the spectrum, you might be looking at new customers, and it might be, let's take Instagram now. It might be that someone's clicked an Instagram advert 3 weeks ago, dropped a relic, cookie, pixel, whatever it needs to be, that says, okay, so Instagram have provided this customer to the retailer. And then actually in the final instance, they might come through Google or they might come through Facebook. So first touch would then give that credit to Instagram. And then you've got various versions in between. So multi-touch, longitudinal kind of credit systems. So that would, let's say that they've clicked both on a Facebook and an Instagram advert. That would give 50% of the credit to each. You might have signed them up to emails in between. So you just kind of divide the credit and you can give more to the first one, more to the last one, decay that through time. But ultimately, there's a family called kind of multi-touch attribution. In general, we tend to help our clients work with multi-touch attribution. We think it's really important to think about it. I know you and I spend a lot of time talking about football teams. Last touch would give all the credit to the striker, whereas actually it's James Maddison doing all the creation behind in midfield that's kind of working.
Spurs fan here.
Sorry, I just thought I'd get that one in after a few weeks ago, Joseph. So it helps to give credit to the kind of full team. So predominantly we'll work with multi-touch. But again, it lifts up to the strategy. If the client is in a space wanting to get lots of new customers in, we might think about first touch as well. Where did you first get your name out there? Where did they first find out about josephcarlisle.co.uk? Where did they first find out about 633 and kind of come through there? So we'll work a lot with multi-touch. We'll work a lot with kind of first touch. What's kind of great about the flexibility of the way we define the metrics that we use is we can move between them. Once you've got the data in place, you can actually look at CLV Adjusted ROAS with different attribution methods. So you can show on the same dashboard, if you gave all the credit to first touch, if you looked at multi-touch, and really see that kind of cohesive system working and in place.
It makes sense. And you spoke about, I guess, the three main attribution models that you do use. In your experience, have you seen any, I guess, drawbacks in particular scenarios for using any one mode of attribution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in particular, there's always a debate around pay-per-click advertising. So what you see, let's still say Google, right? They still dominate the search market. If I go to Google and I search for Barber polo shirt and I click through and purchase something, or if I search for a particular sales brand, that's probably kind of quite late in a customer's journey. And so if you were to use last touch credit, you're going to give all of the revenue to pay-per-click essentially, when actually you haven't been out there generating demand in the market in order to kind of grow that channel. So you need to be very, very careful, particularly around kind of last touch. And frankly, around all kind of attribution-led marketing, you're at risk of forgetting about the flywheel and forgetting about brand building marketing as well. How do you think about the credit for TV or radio or out of home or YouTube or some of that stuff where, you're not going to immediately convert into a sale, but actually you're kind of growing kind of brand awareness. I always think about the Cadbury's adverts with the gorilla kind of from years ago, right? No one's buying a chocolate bar because of that, but they're remembering who Cadbury are because of that. Sure. So across all of the, across last touch in particular, you have to be very careful that you're not giving all the credit to the kind of goal-hanging striker. Across all marketing attribution, you need to make sure that you're giving credit to your kind of brand building spend as well, and make sure that you give the creative space again to kind of do that work.
No, that makes a lot of sense, that holistic view and that end-to-end process, right? Like, when does it start, and not starting it too late, not just focusing on the end. And I also wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit to start speaking about customers, right? And, businesses will do well to, focus and understand, okay, who are the high value customers? Where are they? How can I keep them? How can I get more of them? Especially when thinking about the customer segmentation. Do you mind just speaking to, I guess, how you think about customer segmentation and kind of targeting high value customers?
Yeah, really important question. Whatever the metric that you're looking at, it's not good enough to just track overall what is the business doing. You need to think about those groups or segments of customers. So, you might think about customers who are buying high-end products versus customers that are buying more day-to-day products. You might think about customers who are returning quickly and have complex needs. You might think about demographics. You might think about age and gender kind of being classic important parts of customer segmentations. Really important to not just look at your metrics at an overall level, but kind of inside each of those customer segments. We've worked with clients in the past, for example, who, at an overall level have been growing, but actually their core customer with complex needs who comes back again and again had been shrinking. And, they were topping up their customer base with, easier needs to serve that maybe weren't so aligned to the value proposition. So really important to cut into those customer segments. We think about segmentation against three sets of dimensions. We think about the demographics, who is the person who's buying? Yeah. We think about the kind of RFM or recency, frequency, monetary type metrics. So how much are they spending? How often are they spending? And then we think about a third lens, which often can be missing actually, which is product. So what is it that the customer's buying? What are the combinations of items that the customer's buying? We think that once you put those three lenses together, you can get to a really clear view of who do I want to be selling to? How much are they worth? And then start to build the quality around. And so therefore, what do I market to find them? If your high value customer is buying high end goods, push your marketing towards your higher end goods. Very, very simple.
Yeah. And can that ever be like lopsided in terms of where do you strike the balance between focusing on your high value customers and still trying to gain new customers, different customers? Like, how does one think about the strategic implications of kind of leaning too much towards one side out of interest?
Yeah, you've got to balance that kind of volume and revenue or profit side of things. Okay. I think to an extent it comes to granularity. What is this marketing campaign trying to achieve? Is this marketing campaign about finding high value customers that are going to be long-term in the business? Yeah. Great, let's track how many high value customers have they acquired and at what cost? Or is this marketing campaign about keeping that stable base, driving revenue from the existing customers? Let's think about overall return on advertising spend in that case. So it comes from being really clear on what you're trying to achieve and then tracking success against exactly that.
Yeah, makes sense. And like success is often, it comes down to money, profitability, and metrics that are looked at with regard to that: gross margin, contribution margin. And these are similar in some ways, but also quite different in other ways. What's your view on both of those metrics, and I guess how you can use it to optimize success for your clients?
Yeah, it's so important. And often there might even be a lack of awareness of which level of marketing or revenue a client is tracking at. Taking the ROAS example that we spoke about at the start, this client, imaginary client, was spending £1,000 on marketing and generating £2,000 of revenue. So 2 ROAS. But what's that client's gross profit? If your gross profit's 50%, you're now suddenly at £1 of ROAS, and you need to make sure that you're really optimizing and getting the value for every single penny that you spend. Particularly where businesses have moved from brick and mortar retail to online retail.
Which has happened a lot more in the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. You know, COVID obviously accelerated this hugely. We work with businesses that haven't necessarily fully invested in understanding that there's now a kind of, we call it incremental cost to serve. So what does it cost to run something through your warehouse? What does it cost to post it out? You probably want to give your customers some version of free delivery or free returns. So there's a huge amount of other cost in the stack that needs to be worried about. So you come down from revenue into gross margin, you then start worrying about cost to serve and fulfillment. So you're into a version of contribution margin. You've then spent on marketing. So that's another thing to kind of worry about and make sure that you're profitable at that level. And then obviously kind of head office cost as well. So it's really important to know which level you're talking about. They're all important for different things. We find that it's a lot easier to track and report gross margin than it is to worry kind of and to track fully lower down. A specific example. So return rate. Now, if I've gone online and I've bought something, I might have spent £50 on that item, had a gross margin of £25. At the point where the retailer has taken my credit card details and my money, that transaction is worth £25 to them in terms of gross margin and kind of coming down through. As a customer, I then probably have 30 days to return it. So that retailer needs to be able to track and update what's going on in terms of the real margin all the way through the next 30 days. So you need to build data processes that allow you to update existing items. And that's something that is frankly quite hard to do. You know, you've suddenly built cycles around what was once a kind of locked in transactional data set. Some sectors, you know, fashion, e-commerce, you're looking at kind of 50% return rates even. So really important to track that properly, understand what are the specific things that are being returned, and therefore really understand profitability. And, you know, like, I think you spoke a lot about the business and kind of where their strategic mind should be. When it comes to kind of gross margin and contribution margin, have you seen any, I guess, resistance to organizations kind of focusing more heavily on one versus the other? Yeah, you might find conflicts even between kind of CFOs and CMOs, right? The CFO will always want to worry about contribution margin, almost always. Whereas the chief customer officer or the chief product officer is going to want to think kind of higher up. Chief marketing officer, for example, isn't responsible for what the return rate is going to be. That's dealt with lower down in terms of product. So you need to think about who your audiences are for different decisions and for different metrics. Usually pretty functionally aligned against the kind of CXO's office. But yeah, absolutely. If you end up wanting to talk about kind of revenue or gross margin with a CFO, you're probably going to have a more tricky conversation than thinking lower down that cost stack. Yeah, no,
definitely. And with regards to strategic decision making now, obviously you've had a common theme through your career as it relates to working in strategy and working at that intersection of strategy and analytics. How do you manage kind of communicating to a C-suite that isn't always technical, that doesn't always understand the granularity of, you know, these conversations that we're having? How do you still optimize results for them whilst kind of being involved in the actual nitty gritty?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes to building trust with the teams around them. So our projects tend to work with a kind of weekly working session cadence, working with the hands-on teams who ultimately are going to need to implement any recommendations, and also are the people that hold us to account on the data and the numbers being accurate. We then tend to present back to the senior teams as the answer comes together and almost present answer first. We had a fantastic session a couple of weeks ago with a client. It ended up, we could only get 30 minutes with the CEO and CFO, but that gave us license to just focus on the recommendation. I think, you know, we're analytics consultants and we spent a lot of time in marketing analytics with their teams, but I think there were 2 numbers in the entire meeting. But what we were able to do was really focus on the recommendation. And the question that the CXO says rightly and needs to say is, do my team agree with this? if you can be confident as consultants that the answer to that question is going to be yes, that gives you a lot more license to be kind of number free and thinking about strategic implications rather than getting bogged down. We've had sessions that have gone less well, for example, with a client who the CEO challenges the second bullet point because they say this number's 17%, not 21%. That's a much harder conversation to run. So through the process of our work, building real trust with the hands-on teams, making sure that you've got that data validation and recognition that that's correct, giving you license to talk about strategic implications with the senior teams as well. Yeah, no,
that's a fantastic point. Building trust with the key technical stakeholders at the client, because naturally the C-suite will trust them, right? So coming as an outsider, building trust with people you can build trust with enables you to then influence decisions higher up much easier. If you're enjoying this episode and feel like you've learned something new, then don't forget to subscribe or follow. Now, back to the episode. So yeah, David, we've spoken about e-commerce blind spots for organizations. What are some opportunities within e-commerce analytics that you think organizations can actually jump on and make use of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we predominantly see three kind of buckets of opportunity. There's one around just getting hold of live data and using it to make decisions more strongly and more in a more agile way. There's one around price and promo that some businesses are much better at than others, Amazon being a clear example of the winners. And there's one around customer and marketing and making sure that you're making the strongest decisions there, both on a strategic perspective and optimizing ongoing. So maybe I'll kind of dive into each one.
Yes, please.
So the first one around kind of data access. There's still organizations who are making decisions in the past, and there's no need for that these days. You can have live insight. We think of the example of retail trading meetings on a Monday. The senior team should be going through all of the data on a Sunday, over dinner, a glass of wine, whatever it is that their kind of evening routine is before coming into the office. Once you can put live data in people's hands, you can really reframe those trading meetings. You get organizations where the meetings cover, and so this metric is down X% and this metric is up Y%. Or you get meetings that people have been pre-informed about what's going on or what are those key trends. So instead of this metric's down X%, it's this metric's down X%. The reason is because this region underperformed, or we had a challenge in stock for this particular product. And I'm confident that this will resolve itself next week. Or in order to resolve itself next week, we need support in doing A, B, and C. Yeah. So putting live data in the right people's hands helps to move you from kind of passive backwards looking data analytics into active forwards looking agile business management. So that's kind of the first big opportunity. Yeah. There's a couple of areas where we see that being most important, pricing and promotion being a big one. So are you using all of the data available to you, data about people browsing your website, data about journeys through the website, data about how much stock you've got left, are you tracking above or below forecast in order to make agile pricing decisions? Yeah. Particularly in e-commerce, you're not in a world where you need to update the prices once a month, and that involves a 6-hour shift of going around relabeling shelves. Yeah. And frankly, you can get digital ticker tape these days that solves that problem even in brick and mortar. But now you're in a world where you can change the price every day. You look at Amazon, they're changing prices every day, every hour across different products. You've got to say that they're a good example of a successful e-commerce business. Putting in the foundations to do price and promo more actively. And even on the promo point, we come back to a conversation around revenue, gross profit, contribution margin. Is your promotion driving volume? Is it driving revenue? Is it driving gross profit? All of those metrics need to be thought about. And what was the purpose of the promotion? Are you trying to get new customers in? Yeah. Are you trying to build baskets? Are you trying to drive frequency? So big opportunity around price and promo. And then a big opportunity around customer and marketing. So crucially combining the art and the science, but making sure that you know what are the key metrics, making sure you know how those metrics are performing, making sure you know how those metrics are performing for your different channels, for your different customer segments. That allows you to do two kind of time horizons of thinking, you know, what does my next 12 months look like? How much am I going to spend?
Yeah.
How do I change that through time? How do I make sure I'm agile and not beholden to what I thought was the answer 3 months ago, but can see how things are evolving, can see that we've got great traction with this TikTok advert. Let's keep pushing it. So opportunity to bring data together to make live decisions, and a couple of kind of functional areas where we see that as being absolutely critical: pricing and promo, and then customer and marketing.
And you mentioned a point that I think is so important, right? Data quality is vital. The quality of your data actually enables you to make better decisions. Poor, backward-facing data, old data, you're not making relevant decisions for the future. But actually, when it's live data, you actually, you know, have the opportunity to make better decisions based on better data. So I think that's like, you know, a super important point. And like, as we kind of wrap up here, like you mentioned some opportunities, what are you kind of most excited about as it relates to what is on the horizon in e-commerce analytics over the next kind of 12, 18, 36 months?
I think there are two big things that are changing. I can't say whether I'm excited or nervous. I guess maybe both.
Maybe both.
I quite like my job, so maybe they're the same thing. But, you know, one of them is obviously artificial intelligence. You know, how is that going to change? If we think about the idea that customers are going to have virtual assistants doing their shopping for them, you know, how is that going to massively increase the number of web sessions, for example, as the virtual assistants go out and crawl all of the available information, present, you know, let's think about clothing and fashion, present example outfits bought from different retailers. No, it's going to massively change the game, and the requirement to provide the kind of metadata that powers those models, but also the requirement to make sure that you've got systems in place to deal with that greater scale and volume. So I think artificial intelligence will be a big one. Huge. And the other one is ownership of personal data. So we had a big change last year as Apple started to hugely restrict the amount of information that's shared across apps. That makes it much harder to track some of the journeys that we've spoken about. It's much harder to say, you know, this client, this customer clicked an Instagram advert, then clicked an email, then saw us on TikTok, and then made a purchase. But more broadly than that, the customer owns everything about them. You know, how do e-commerce retailers aligned to this new world make sure that you're still able to be profitable, but while respecting the boundaries that different customers want to be able to share and spend? So that's going to cause a lot of kind of change in the e-commerce analytics and the marketing analytics market over the course of the next 2, 3, 5 years. Not quite sure exactly how that's going to end up, but I'm looking forward to going on the journey.
Yes, so am I. And I mean, like over the last year or so, we've seen a massive shift in how like people are interacting with artificial intelligence, and it's pretty much changed every vertical and sector out there. Out of interest, how have you seen C-suite react to these changes? Because like I've been, you know, speaking with CEOs and CTOs, and, you know, some of it is fear of missing out. You know, on the other side, it's like, you know, staying away from it. Have we got the technology ready right now for some use cases? Maybe not. But what's your kind of view on how you see C-suite reacting to the kind of artificial intelligence shift that we're continuously seeing in the market right now?
There's definitely a lot of fear of missing out and a lot of fantastic ideation. You know, these are the thinkers within businesses who can see ideas ideally ahead of others. You know, that's why they've got into these incredible opportunities and roles. The challenge will always be having a technology platform and a team that can deliver on that ideation. You know, I see there being relatively significant numbers of businesses where the C-suite wants to be able to go after opportunities, but the basics, the kind of data platform, the data access, the live data that you mentioned, even data accuracy isn't in place before you think about all of the kind of enhancements and data attributes
100%.
And kind of metadata that's going to need to be there as well. So I think there's going to be almost a split path of businesses who have previously or right now are investing hard in some of that underlying data platform. and they're going to be able to go after these opportunities when they come together, and it's going to take a while for them to crystallize. But I do think there's going to be a second path where there are businesses that see the opportunities but can't quite get after them, and I think that's going to cause real challenge, particularly in e-commerce, which is struggling and had not its greatest last couple of years. So it's going to be a challenge for some of those businesses. Yeah, no, for sure. Businesses certainly want to position themselves to be able to take advantage of, the potential out there. And, one of the last questions as we wrap up here, David, that I always ask is I kind of put the spotlight on the individual, right? And kind of the spotlight's definitely on both of us right now, but, on you right now as it relates to your career. You've achieved a tremendous amount of success in your career so far. What has been one of, or a few nuggets of the best pieces of advice that you've had that's really allowed you to navigate your career and kind of make good decisions, or maybe even skip out on bad decisions? I've definitely made my share of bad decisions as well. But, while the spotlight's on, let's think about the good ones. Yeah, exactly. One of the big pieces of advice that you hear, particularly in consulting, is so much of it being about network and learning to talk to people and kind of build the relationships that will work there. I actually think it's even simpler than that. It's just be nice to people. You have no idea what conversation is going to turn around in 2 weeks' time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, and be incredibly valuable. Joseph, I take our working relationship, for example, I respected when we first worked together because you weren't just trying to kind of place me in a role, right? You wanted to know a bit about me and what I wanted. I then took that opportunity. We kept in touch. I can't say we saw each other every month or anything, but once a year we'd keep in touch and chat. And then being able to work with your business to grow what DVS has become over the last over the last 2 years as well. That was just being nice to each other, right? We just wanted to catch up, No, for sure. Usually talk about when Tottenham had won, not United had won. But, that has grown into such a productive thing, hopefully for both of us. Of our team of 5, two of them have come through your organisation. So, people say it's about networking. I think it's about being nice to people, and it's about never knowing what a conversation can turn into. I think I'm an introvert. I definitely come out as an introvert if I'm thinking about my personal life, and I get my energy from my own time sometimes, but in business and in work, I've managed to kind of create this more extroverted personality that hopefully you kind of see a little bit of today. And knowing how important it is to take the time for that coffee, check in with that person, catch up with that person you haven't seen or spoken to in a few months. I think absolutely essential, whether you're trying to drive opportunities within your current career, whether you're thinking about who you might work with or job opportunities in future, or, as I've gone out into building my own business, who are going to be the business partners that we work with, who are going to be the potential clients, who are going to be the potential team that are going to work with us as well. So really, really simple, be nice to people. I think that's fantastic advice, David. Be nice to people, network matters. And I've seen that play out time and time again when people are nice to have that conversation, when people are open to having that conversation. And you mentioned something interesting, because it's there's different personality types, right? I would describe myself sometimes as a introverted extrovert, right? It's kind of that blend. But how would you advise people, especially in a remote working environment, to kind of still have those conversations, still be open for that coffee? How have you seen it managed well within a kind of more remote environment? Yeah, it's a really good question. And also kind of respecting each individual personality as well. If you and I are maybe similar in kind of extroverted introverts, introverted extroverts, we might find it slightly easier, but respecting who in your team has different personality types as well, and giving different forums for people to be able to engage in the remote working world. And it's a habit I need to get back into. I did it last week for the first time in a long time. Taking a call with your team when you're out for a walk, even if you're out for a walk on your own, but it can change the pressure of, being sat at your laptop screen, being able to see everyone's body language, staring at each other's face and into each other's eyes. It's intense, right? It's quite high pressure. you can help bring yourself out as well as members of the team,
Take
be it your peers.
out of the environment.
Exactly. It might be your peers, it might be your reports, it might be your managers, but you get a different conversation in different settings. So if you're fully remote, just go for a walk and have a phone call.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to get together a little bit, use those opportunities. Don't go into the office to sit at your screen for 12 hours optimizing CLV Adjusted ROAS. Go to the office to have lunch with someone or have coffee with someone, or just, smile and see them. There doesn't need to be a huge amount kind of underneath that. Or if you're running the organization and leading the team, find space for offsites. It's such an important part of building that trust, helping the different individuals with your team feel comfortable in different settings.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's a perfect point to end on. Be nice to people, make time for conversations. And David, I really appreciate your time today. We've spoken about a lot. I'll have you linked down in the comments and in all of the relevant places for people to find out more about you, your business, and what's happening. But thank you so much for your time, and I really loved having you on the Me, You and Data podcast.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you so much for watching till the end of that episode. Hopefully you found value in that episode. And if you did, then don't forget to subscribe, follow, and also share this episode with others. And if you would like to know more about what we do here at 633, which is to help data professionals find work and help amazing organizations hire technical talent, so don't hesitate to get in touch.